it is pretty grim at the moment, particularly watching the American news. I mean, it's grim if you're in America. Trump has obviously just got sworn in, and his first thing, I'm not quite sure why fascists' first thing to do. I mean, actually, I do know why. Fascists' first thing that they do at the moment is attack trans people. Donald Trump's just done it. Viktor Orban did it when he got in power. And it was actually one of the first things the Nazis did was to burn down research into trans and intersex people in the Weimar Republic. So it's a thing they do. And it's because we are one of the easiest targets. We can't fight back. We have like no institutional power. It's very easy to turn hordes of people against a minority who don't have a voice when there's like centuries of propaganda and conditioning to make people ready to turn against us. So that's why he's doing it. I don't actually think Donald Trump himself cares at all. Either way, like if it was politically convenient for him to support trans people, then he would do. But it's not, and so he's just doing this. But I think one of the important things to do is to not follow every single possible news story all the time. It is important for you, if you're in the USA, to have a plan. If you're in one of the worst states, to be safe or to get out of there if you can and if you need to. I think it's very conditional on where you live, how much money you have, what your family and job situation is. But I do think you need to get your ducks in order, or whatever the phrase is. Whatever you can do now, do it. They're going to try and stop you from changing your names, your passports, everything. So just try and get everything in order. But don't have your, don't doom scroll 24/7, because a lot of the things you'll see them, some Republican somewhere will announce, oh, we're going to try and eradicate trans people from the earth or something. And then all the news sites will be very radical, in a frenzy to try and report it, because they love reporting that kind of thing because they hate trans people. But then lots of it won't happen, or it will happen in such an incompetent way that they'll fail to actually affect most people, or it'll get struck down by the courts. Or there are so many possible things. We see this in the UK too. There was a amendment put on a bill today where they're trying to undermine trans people's privacy. And if you just see the news, the right-wing papers will be like, current government decides to remove trans people's privacy, or they'll frame it as protecting women in some way. But this bill in the UK still has multiple stages through Parliament, and it's, weeks, months, years away from doing anything, and there's loads of room for it to be pulled apart. And it's the same in the USA. I know that your court system are kind of falling apart and are getting more corrupt, but that doesn't mean that the whole thing is gonna just give in, and just remember that fascists are incompetent. But yeah, I think when you keep reading all the negative stuff, it's very easy to panic. If it was just if everything was just totally normal and fine, and then they said, oh, there's a possibility in the future that they might try and take away trans people's passports, then that would be terrifying. But it'd be one thing that you could focus on, and you could have a backup plan for, and you can work around, and we could campaign for. But the thing is, they announced that, and then 5 minutes later, they're like, oh, and we're going to try and take away healthcare. And then 5 minutes later, it's like, oh, and we're going to try and ban you from sport. And, oh, we're also going to try and arrest you for walking down the street and things. And there's too many things at once to focus on. It feels like this impending wave of inevitable crushing death, basically. But that isn't the reality of it. And this isn't me being some delusional, oh, it's all going to be fine, but actually I'm, a rich white person in a different country, so stop complaining. And that is true to an extent. But, I am experiencing the panic and the terror as much as anyone else, both for myself in my own country about what's happening here, and for my friends and just other people in other countries. There is real dangers. It's a real but it's going to get worse for a while. But but it isn't so bad that you should just give in to the fear and panic and do nothing, which is exactly what they want you to do and exactly what some people will do. Some of you, when faced with stress, your reaction will be to do something about it straight away. But I think a lot of people are like me, where when there's too many things at once, it is overwhelming to the point where your brain just like locks up and you cannot handle it. So you need to focus on the rest of your life. Make sure you have breaks. Make sure you don't believe every single story. Like, just because it's in the Times or the New York Times or the Telegraph or whatever, they lie about trans stuff all the time. I was just going through some of my old videos to make thumbnails for them, and I encountered that the Times had, the UK Times had some headlines saying 1,000 families to sue the gender clinic for children in the UK. That never happened. But that was a headline. They were like, 1,000 families to sue. That's now like a core part of gender critical law, where they're like, remember when 1,000 families sued? None of them did. There was literally zero. And the story, which presented as truth in the newspaper, was based on a fragment of truth, which was some legal representation company had said maybe there were as much as 1,000 people out there who might want to sue. And then it turns out the actual number is, zero. But they were being optimistic and trying to sell their services. But it's the same with all of this. Yes, they're going to try and stop trans people from updating their passports in the US. And some news outlets will report that as removing trans people's passports. At the moment, there's no news that they're going to remove passports people already have. Today, they have not yet stopped it, so you can apply today to change them. And it might not go through. There might be court, injunctions. There's so many things that can still happen. Don't be immobilized by fear. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more later. But the reason I wanted to talk about this, and I hope this isn't a jarring, change of pace, but I have personally been feeling the dread and the horror and the fear. But I've really been going out of my way to try and not be overwhelmed by it. And to do that, I have been focusing on my hobbies, but not solely. The reason I'm back here on YouTube, because I feel like, and on Blue Sky and various other places, is because I feel like I need to do something. But I can't only do activism because it burns me out. So I have also been doing hobbies, just trying to have some kind of work-life facing the horrific void balance, as trans people do. We don't just get work-life balance, we get work-life and Lovecraftian horror as the three things to balance. But you do need a mix of all of those, I think.